So welcome to this presentation and hello from Canada. My name is Geoffrey Maina. I'm Associate Professor, College of Nursing, University of Saskatchewan. So my presentation today, which I have entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? Reflections on Possibilities Following the Launching of a Psychoeducational Toolkit for Family Affected by Addiction in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Canada, is a reflection on the process and the outcome of the work that we did in developing psychoeducation toolkit for families affected by addiction in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So as you can see from the map, Prince Albert is in central Saskatchewan and is the third biggest city in Saskatchewan. It has a population of 40,000 people. Now, Saskatchewan is a big province in Midwestern Canada, but has a population of about 1.1 million people. And Prince Albert is often referred as the gateway to the north, as it serves the communities of more than 90,000 people. Essentially, there is no major city north of Prince Albert. So a lot of neighboring communities do come to Prince Albert for shopping and other services. Now, I moved to Prince Albert in July of 2016 to assume a position of assistant professor with the University of Saskatchewan. And I was drawn to the local statistics on substance use. And as you can see from the statistics that I've shared here, in particular, the use of alcohol, is that the statistics are not flattering at all. Our statistics, which range from per capita use to youth alcohol consumption, is higher than both the national and provincial averages. And as you can see, a lot of resources are used to manage the aftermath that is associated with substance use, including a very high healthcare cost and policing costs. Like, for instance, you can see, given the small size of our city, the Prince Albert Police Services arrested close to 6,000 people for public intoxication. And that in and of itself costs 2.5 million people. $2.5 million. And although the statistics are a bit old, we believe that the situation has not improved. And as a matter of fact, it seems to be getting worse. So, as a community-based researcher, I wondered where to start given the state of the substance use in the city. And so, after a back and forth consultation, I led a team in applying for a seed grant to organize a knowledge exchange event whose title was The Prince Albert We Want. And so this photo captures a section of the people who attended this event in June of 2017. And of the many suggestions and recommendations that were made, it was very apparent that families affected by addiction did not have the same level of support compared to people with substance use disorder. And so this focus to me as a researcher was both narrow and specific enough for me to start from there. And so we put together a team that comprised of researchers, people with lived experiences, healthcare providers, decision makers, as well as community members to apply for a research whose aim was to understand the needs for families affected by addiction and thereafter develop an intervention that would address this need. And so we are very fortunate that we were awarded this research funding. And so, as expected, the caring for families affected by addiction has significant physical, emotional, psychological, social, and financial consequences. However, families themselves are oblivious of the need to prioritize self-care to mitigate against these consequences. So this is just a screenshot of a couple of the publications that arose from our research that we conducted. And so, typical to a community-based researcher, whenever you do research, you bring back the findings to the community. So in September 2019, we returned to the community to share the results of the study. And among the many things that the community suggested for the intervention, they were very clear that the voices of participants needed to be included. And as you can see, as we were putting the team together, we were just at the cusp of COVID-19. And so we had to change a lot of plans to accommodate the limitations that COVID-19 brought. And so we settled for the development of a psychoeducation toolkit because of the restriction that the COVID-19 brought to us. And so anyway, so the working group that we created comprised of the researchers, people with lived experiences, healthcare providers, and the community members. And so we created a 52-page document with information that we believed that families affected by addiction would need. And so the aim of this toolkit was to increase self-awareness and empower affected families to take agency in their own self-care. And so the toolkit is on the left. And so the table of content has a breakdown of the topics that the community suggested, as well as a working group that felt it was important, including critical contact information that families affected by addiction would use in the event of a crisis. But at the same time, there was a need to develop bookmarks that summarizes main information for families that was to be distributed to the city, including doctors' offices. So because the bookmarks were cheap to produce, we were able to create about 1,000 to print about 1,000 bookmarks. And the bookmarks on one side has information that summarizes the impact of substance use on a family. And on the other side, it has critical contact information. So we've been distributing these resources across the city. And so once the resources were developed, in November of 2022, we brought the community together once again to share the documents. In other words, to launch the documents. And the documents were well received, and each attendee was given 2 booklets and 10 bookmarks to carry with them. And as you can see, and as I will be talking about in the next couple of slides, I'll be focusing more on what has happened since this event of launching the psychoeducation toolkit for families affected by addiction. So there are a couple of opportunities that arose as a result of us completing this project. Number one is that the Prince Albert alcohol strategy, which aim is to create healthy communities by encouraging the communities of Prince Albert to change unhealthy attitudes and behavior around alcohol use, and instead encourage healthier communities to embrace healthy behaviors that have a more healthier relationship with alcohol, agreed to host in their website this document. At the same time, I was requested to join the board of directors of Community Alcohol Strategy Steering Committee. A couple of months later, somebody read some of the work that we had published on this topic and invited me to join Affected Family International Network. Before then, I did not know that such an organization existed, and that individual encouraged me to consider submitting an abstract for this conference for which I'm presenting. And at the same time, I also got an invitation from a partner that we are developing collaboration and asked me to write a book chapter on the impact of addiction on the quality of life of affected family members. And so I used my reflection on my experiences working on this project as a basis for the writing of a section of the book chapter. Now, what future plans are we thinking about? You know, when I thought that I was done with this project, more and more possibilities seems to be arising. And so we feel that it is a huge need, given the pervasiveness of substance use in our community, that there's a need to create awareness for families affected by addiction, especially how addiction is affecting families. There's a very clear understanding that of how addiction is affecting an individual who uses substances, but it appears to us there is no clear understanding of how the stress associated with substance use is actually impacting people who are affected by substance use. And so we believe that when we create awareness about the impact of addiction on families themselves, that somehow that awareness can translate into increasing agency for self-care. And so we are hoping and working towards collaborating with local radio networks to syndicate messages on the effect of addiction on families. So we'll be developing content out of the toolkit that we have created as the basis for which this education to families is going to happen. And then, of course, to achieve these objectives, whether it's creation of podcasts or whether it is the working alongside the radio networks that we want to develop a relationship, we are looking forward to applying for additional grants to build capacity for affected family members to engage in self-care through robust peer support programs. We believe that this work should be championed and pioneered by people who are actually affected by addiction. And that is our commitment, that we feel very strongly that there's a need to build capacity for the families affected by addiction to take a center stage in working alongside other agencies to support self-care for families affected by addiction. And so what have we learned from the project? Now, conducting this project has been a huge delight for me because it has given us an opportunity to develop relationship with the local partners and to learn from them. And one of the things that has been very clear to me is that we are all affected by addiction in one way or another. And I feel that we have a responsibility, particularly so for me as a researcher, to be able to communicate that addiction is both a family and a community issue. And so if we are able to articulate the impact of addiction, not only on the family, but also to a community at large, we believe that somehow, in one way or another, that the community can easily come together to address the issues of substance use that affect them. Another thing that became very clear to us, and I didn't have a lot of time to talk about it, is that substance use stigma is very much alive and well. So this was manifested by some of the conversations around why people feel that they don't want to share their story publicly, because the people who struggle with addiction, for most part, are public figures whose, if their addiction struggles were to become public knowledge, they would either lose their business or they will lose their standing in society. And so a lot of families are suffering in silence and in shame because they can't take themselves to come forward and share the struggles of their families who are affected by addiction. And so by extension, we feel that there's a need to create a safe space where those individuals who cannot come publicly to talk about the impact of addiction in their families can find a safe space to be able to talk about that, but also to be able to build capacity for them to engage in self-care. Another thing that became very clear for us is that the needs and the struggles of families affected by addiction are not fully acknowledged. And that becomes evident in the amount of programming and the services that are available for families who are affected by addiction. We believe that the reason as to why there's a paucity of support programs within the healthcare system is because the healthcare policymakers and decision makers may not be fully aware of how addiction affects families. And therefore, Support for these families is desperately required. Another thing that we have learned is that community-based research takes a lot of patience, but is very rewarding, because in all this, being able to develop relationship with important stakeholders and being able to take the issues that they consider to be important and run with it and ensure that we are not responding to our own interests as researchers has been very gratifying. And so I think this has been the journey that we have engaged in for the last couple of years. And if you'd like to learn more about what I've shared, you can shoot me an email at geoffrey.maina@usask.ca. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to seeing you in person in the next couple of days. Thank you and bye.